Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Danielle of Zen Space and Cupping Studio here in Portland, Oregon. Today, I'm joined by my friend Angelica Lee. She is my fellow Hawaii girl. She's a fitness instructor. She lives in Bend, Oregon. She was born and raised in Hawaii and went to school in California before settling in Oregon. She's joining me today to talk about her experience as an Asian American, both growing up in Hawaii and living on the mainland United States as well. So, hi, Angelica.
Hello, Danielle. What's up?
Excited to see you.
Good to see you too. I'm so glad to be on here. So honored to be interviewed by you.
Yeah. So, first question. What was it like growing up in Hawaii?
Well, it was an amazing experience living in Hawaii. I miss it so much. My mom and dad are from the Philippines, and they moved. Well, my dad lived in Maui when he was like early 20s, and then my mom wanted to move to Maui to live the American dream. And she wanted to be a nurse. And then they didn't know each other. So I'm just telling their love story. It was actually an arranged marriage. And so, in order for them to be US citizens, they had to get married. And so, their age gap is 12 years. And so, my dad was working at the sugar plantation, and my mom at the time had to work at, she worked at the airport, I think, at the time, and then had us kids. So I am the middle child. I have two other brothers, one older and one younger. And yeah, it was we were like one cute Filipino family. And growing up, it was super chill compared to where I'm at right now. I'm in Central Oregon, and it is beautiful desert, and it's like Hawaii. It's like super laid back and awesome weather, but desert. And in Maui, it was the lifestyle that we've had was, going to the beach all the time. We've had our regular routines of hanging out at the parks or going to the same restaurants here and there. And more so, what I remember was, as a Filipino family, we were always going to social gatherings, whether it was like a birthday party or some celebration of someone like 46th birthday or something. It's huge bash with the karaoke machine. The tables in the garage was just like full of food, and it was just like second cousins, third, fourth cousins, uncles, aunties. Everyone was called aunties and uncles. And so every time here, that's another thing that felt uncomfortable for me, to be like, oh, for my kids, I have two boys, Ethan and Skylar. Ethan is almost 10 and Skylar is almost 8. And if I have a friend over, it's like, hey, that's Auntie, And for my friend, it's awkward for her because it's like, why are you calling me Auntie? It's like, oh, that's a Hawaii thing, right? A Hawaii thing is like anyone who's close to you, anyone's friends of a friend, Auntie or uncle, right? And with these social like hangouts, that was the norm. We were always hanging out and not feeling like lonely for the most part, especially in the Filipino culture. It's like my auntie was always around, my grandma, grandpa was always hanging out, my uncle hung out at our house all the time. So
Yeah, I mean, even me who's not Filipino or Asian at all, I mean, yeah, everyone was auntie, uncle. Hawaii's like such a communal kind of society. Everyone, you go to the
yeah.
beach, the kids are running around, everyone's looking after them. It's like very family oriented. Everyone's auntie, uncle.
Mhm.
I love that. I miss that so much actually about that's one of my favorite things about Hawaii is just community. It's like so much community there. Everyone's looking out for each other. When I first moved to the mainland, one thing that I was telling people was like, people just like aren't friendly here. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like you
Mm.
make friends so easily or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but like in Hawaii, for example, if I was like on the side of the road having an issue, somebody would pick me up. I would feel completely safe getting into their car. If they found out I hadn't eaten that day, they'd probably take me home and like force feed me and then like drop me
Oh
off
my
at
gosh, I
the bus or
love
something like
that.
that? Whereas like
Yeah.
when they're just like, not my business, not gonna get
Oh my
involved.
gosh.
Um, so
Absolutely.
Yeah. And from,
And that's another thing. I was thinking about how even like the aloha spirit, right? The aloha spirit was always hugging, kissing each other on the cheek, it all the time. And you always have to be respectful with your elders. Like go say hi, auntie. Hi, auntie. Like, how are you doing? Like, I'm good, auntie. Like, always having to respond in that type of rapport. And it's like, if you don't kiss them, it's like, no good. That's not good. Or else you're gonna get the slipper.
yeah, yeah, no, that's true. When I first moved to the mainland too, I would like greeting new people, I would kiss them on the cheek, and people would be like, "Why is this girl kissing me?"
Yes.
Yeah, and now I go home and people think I'm just like so howly because I like don't
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't immediately
Exactly.
do that or whatever. I pick it back up pretty quickly though. So
Can't wait until post COVID. It's like, yes, like my aloha spirit is gonna come back. Like you watch,
yeah,
like
absolutely.
embrace and kiss on the
Yeah,
cheek.
I can't wait. Let's just all look forward to those days.
I know. Yeah.
Do you feel like you had a good understanding of Asian American history growing up?
I had snippets of the Asian American history from like what you mentioned. It all like came back to me like Pearl Harbor and Oahu and just how that played out. And but more so it was for me being ingrained in how Hawaii was shaped and the Asian Americans who immigrated to live and um, be enculturated. Is that the word in the Hawaii's lifestyle? And so and more of how Hawaii was shaped and more for me of like realizing my parents didn't really like share more of like their Filipino culture. It was sadly, and so it's more about me growing up in Hawaii and adopting more of like the Hawaii culture and how the feelings were expressed when like, for example, like King K, or I'm not King K, I'm trying to like one of the schools you have to be 10% Hawaiian, and so realizing that it's like knowing you have to see like the importance of being Hawaiian in the islands. Like that was how like the history of like what it was before and what has happened and what has the changes that has made, and that really became like a passion for me. Like I more so on top of being an Asian American, it was more about like the the culture of Hawaii that really shaped who I am
Yeah,
here. So,
absolutely. And actually, I meant to ask you to go into a little bit more. Can you talk a little bit more about your parents having an arranged marriage? Because I think, from a Western perspective, that's such a foreign concept to us. But I think
mhm.
it's actually pretty common, and we'll talk a lot about this a little bit more later too. But pretty common um, in some of the Asian cultures, and especially for people who came to Hawaii, a lot of them wanted to have a wife from their country, and picture brides were actually really common in Hawaii back in the
Mhm.
day, not anymore. But can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, my parents were Filipino. They were from Ilocosur, Philippines, and Nagbukel. And so, my dad, his intention, he had family already like rooted in Maui, and so his goal was to like move to Maui and live the American dream and find a wife there. Whereas the family that was already there knew of my mom in the Philippines. And so that information was relayed to my mom like, hey, Annabelle, do you want to move to Maui? It's like, yeah, I would love to move to Maui. It's like, well, you got to marry this guy. and she was like how old is he? Oh, 12 years old. And like, oh, gross. Okay, well, I'm trying to say it in like current terms. So with sacrifice, she was the oldest out of six kids. She's like, I will be the one that comes to Maui, marries this guy, um, becomes American citizen, be able to make money to provide for her family, her brothers and sisters, her mom and dad, and her relatives in the Philippines. So that was the intention. So that was the sacrifice she had to make. And even though it wasn't ideal, she made it work and had three of us.
Yeah. And did they fall in love? Are they like
Ah,
totally in love or?
long story. Well, this is another situation or story is that, well, my mom passed away from stage 4 cancer, from pancreatic cancer 6 years ago. And prior to that, when I was 9, they separated. So at that time, my dad was owned a Filipino restaurant called Donnie's A La Kitchen, and we would help serve food and like eat the Filipino food, all of those lovely things. And at the same time, my mom, yeah, with this arranged marriage, it wasn't gonna go well. And so after, I guess like 9 years of 10 years of marriage, that's when they decided to separate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So interesting. So I actually remember, I don't know, I think it was in high school, but I had a teacher who showed us this film called Picture Bride. And I would encourage anybody who's listening to this and interested in a little bit of the history of Hawaii, what it was like living on plantations back when Hawaii was mainly sugar and pineapple plantations. Before like Hawaii became the tourist destination it is today, it was actually very big agricultural. Um, Land, and a lot of people came over as migrant workers, people from the Philippines, from Japan, from China, and from Portugal came over, and they would all work together on these sugarcane plantations or pineapple plantations and live in plantation housing and just kind of live there, work there for very low wages most of the time. And they were coming from all these different cultures, and a lot of them didn't really know English. They came over to work, so they didn't know English at all. And the people who ran the plantations didn't teach them English. And that's actually, from what I understand, the genesis of Pidgin English, because you have all these different people speaking different languages, trying to communicate with each other, trying to learn English, and speaking kind of like a broken English that also kind of has like a lot of Hawaiian words, Filipino words, Japanese words, Chinese words, Portuguese words, all kind of like mixed in there. And so that's kind of the genesis of Pidgin English. It's a type of Creole English. Anyway, there was this movie that I watched called Picture Bride, and it was about this woman coming over from Japan for an arranged marriage to work in the sugarcane plantation. So it's really like a really good insight into some of Hawaiian history, or I mean, it's not Hawaiian history; it's like Americanized Hawaiian history, I guess you could say. But really interesting. So that's really interesting that your parents, also had that kind of a setup going. And I'm really sorry to hear about your mom.
thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
so did after talking about that a little bit, did you experience what was your experience of being Asian American um, on the mainland United States? Like, did it change very much from being in Hawaii? Did you experience how was that experience for you?
Uh, the so I moved to Cali to go to school in LA after high school. And there was, like a good amount of diversity. And I was like expecting that because I would go to visit LA, like to see like distant relatives and whatnot. And I was mindfully prepared for that. And then having to connect with like another Asian American from, let's say, like the Bay Area, different, night and day. Like the way that he or she was raised in the Bay Area, whereas like an Asian American in Hawaii, like it's like different. So, and uh, that was where I felt like that disconnect a little bit. Like even if I've I get to see like an Asian sister, another Filipina girl, it's like different. And the things that you even mentioned, like the pigeon, like it brought me back to how like self-conscious I became. Like the buildup of like, wow, everyone speaks straight English, and I feel as if my pigeon is so thick that I'm like, I gotta fix it. I have like that's like not acceptable here. People don't understand what I'm talking about. Two, they'll think that I'm like dumb. And like three, like I'm not gonna be like, did I say I'm not gonna be accepted? I'm just not gonna be accepted. Like it's just like really difficult. And so having to force myself to be like American real or mainlander real quick was like really difficult, you know, for me to be like, okay, I have to like change my ways to be accepted. And at the same time, it's like when I fly back to visit Maui, it's like, wow, you are so white. Like, why are you all talking white now? I'm like, oh, so it's like such, I feel so torn being pulled left and right constantly. And and I wanted to bring it back to how my parents uh, did not teach me Filipino. Like they didn't teach me the language. They taught me like colloquial, like just, you know, conversational stuff. I'll understand it. Like I'll get what they're saying. However, I can't speak it. And the reason why is because they were afraid that if I spoke Filipino, I wouldn't be accepted. You know, like they wanted me to be as white as possible in Hawaii. And then it's like now that I'm in the mainland, it's like I'm like so not as white. And so that has been such a like struggle for me internally, and like being self-conscious of like how I spoke.
Yeah.
And at the same time it's like Filipinos in the mainland, or like people who are asking me like, oh, you're Filipino, speak the language. Like, sorry, I don't know it. I wish I did.
Yeah.
I definitely regret, like I wish I could be able to like speak the language. I could if I would, but it's just like at this moment I'm like, yeah, in due time I will definitely get back into the culture and immerse myself in it so that the boys can know it too, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that is like the story of a lot of first generation people. I think, you know, that their families wanted them to assimilate, and so didn't teach them the language. Like, for example, my dad's family, they're all like Italian immigrants. They came over to Detroit to work in the auto industry back in the day, and my dad's grandfather like didn't speak any English. He only spoke Italian, really, but his kids don't speak Italian, because he wanted them to assimilate and be American. And um, it's too bad, you know? It's too bad. I think it kind of makes American culture a little bit devoid of culture, you know, because American culture is a lot of people that came over, unless you're Native American. It's a lot
Mhm.
of people that came over from different places and then were self-conscious about being different and wanted to assimilate and be, you know, this new gentrified American. And a lot of it kind of made them lose their culture a little bit. And it's too bad. But I do think in like 20, you know, or the 21st century, there is a lot of conversation about recapturing culture and celebrating beautiful cultures and learning about, you know, where you came from and your roots and that sort of thing. Like in Hawaii, for example, there's a big movement for people to learn Hawaiian. Like my little niece is going to a Hawaiian immersion school so she can actually learn the language of Hawaii, because,
Right.
you know, when the missionaries came over and stole the land, they wouldn't let anybody speak Hawaiian, and almost eradicated that language. And now there's a big resurgence for people to speak it again in Hawaii, which is so amazing. So really, I think that that's something that I look forward to in the future, seeing more people relearning their cultures. And uh,
Absolutely.
yeah. And then what else was I gonna say? Oh yeah, I mean, just you talking about being self-conscious of speaking pidgin, or being self-conscious about like being too white when you go home to Hawaii, or being too like Hawaii for the mainland, is interesting conversation as well. I've just had like, even me, you know, I am white and I'm from Hawaii. And I do have like my great grandmother's Hawaiian Portuguese, and then like my dad's side is like white and Italian, and my mom is also a lot of white. And so I kind of have this like ethnically ambiguous look, especially like when I have a tan. And just moving to Seattle, people would say the weirdest stuff to me. I was always just like, oh my God, where do you come up with this stuff? Like, a lot of times I would get like, oh, you're from Hawaii. You don't sound like you're from Hawaii. And I was like, what does that even mean? Like, what are you talking about? Like, um, for one, that's a pretty offensive thing to say. Like, how are we supposed to sound in Hawaii? And for two, like, do you even know what you're talking about? Anyway, and
I
then,
know. Or even this, like I'm Filipino, right? I'm like the whatever, like blood, no Hawaii DNA in me. But like people who ask me like, "Oh, where are you from?" Like, "Oh yeah, I'm from Hawaii." They're like, "Wow, yeah, you do look Hawaiian." I'm like, "Oh, I knew that you look Hawaiian." I'm like, "How do you know though? How do you know that I am from Hawaii though?" Tell
yeah,
me. Like just because I like have like the majority like Asian look, like you just have to like presume. Like I could easily be like, "Yeah, I'm actually from the Bay Area." Like I was like just like the like little stereotypes. I mean, remember the stereotype of like, oh, do you surf, right? Oh, you live in a grass shack. Like, oh, like
oh yeah.
unplug
Like people
that.
would ask me, do they really live in grass shacks in Hawaii? And I'm like, what are you even talking about? No. Or do you guys really wear grass skirts? I'm like, on big
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I did do hula.
yeah.
I
I
can
mean,
bodyboard. It's not like it's a thing. It's a natural thing you automatically get into, you know.
oh yeah, people are like shocked that I don't know how to surf. But I always tell them I was more of a turf person than a surf person. But
Oh, same.
all right, so you recently started Fitness Professionals of Color on Instagram, and you're really highlighting a lot of different fitness professionals of color, obviously. And what was your inspiration behind that, and how did you find your voice for advocacy?
Love that question. So, like I mentioned earlier to you before this interview, it's a when I started this nonprofit journey and shared it with like my friends in Hawaii, there wasn't as an excitement or spark of the fact that I chose this advocacy route to stand up for the BIPOC community. They're like, "Oh, good for you, nice." Like it's because of like there's Hawaii's diversity 100%, and then coming here, it's like pursuing this nonprofit is like, "Wow, amazing! Like that is the craziest, amazing thing you're doing. I love it," and that is already like the shock where it's like that's part of the reason why I want to do this is because of like the awareness that needs to be made. It's like let's try to pursue diversity or like acknowledge the diversity with those that are in the fitness industry, like people of color, and it's like those that are teaching or instructing or coaching, leading in the fitness industry. It's like let's try to share their voices. Let's try to like flaunt them in this industry because of the history of Oregon and knowing Oregon, learning about Oregon in the Pacific Northwest and Washington. It's like it was historically like a racist region, and having to know that now, and it's like there is a growth of diversity, but it's still like there is still the token black guy, there's still the token Asian girl or instructor, what have you, and it's like the first initial goal for this organization was to be able to like provide support and knowing that there are not you're not a token, there is a huge network of people that I want to find that will like other instructors of color, like, hey, I'm here too in Washington, like we can like hype each other up. And like I would like, you know, non BIPOC community to know like, dang, like they should be recognized for what they're doing, you know? Like that's a huge, I would say like it's so brave of uh fitness professionals of color to be able to like lead in this industry, like a predominantly white city. And for me, what motivated it is because I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like the only Asian. And that was more of like, okay, like I need to find other people of color who are instructors because of my struggles. Being the only one, I'm like, am I like it started off with no one coming to my classes, let's just say. Like I'm just over exaggerating. No one come to my classes, and I'm like, is it because I'm Asian? And it's like that thought right there was like I didn't want to think that way, but it's like it just so happened. It's like I can't help it that everyone's going to the other like, you know, white instructors or something. And like are so that question was like, are there other instructors that feel this way? I would like to support you. Like I would like to be here for you and remind you like it is not about your race that is hindering you from living out your best self, you know? Like we are here, we got you, like let's support you in every way. So initially I wanted to have businesses, small businesses to support you, like photography for your brand, I don't know, like get you like clothing to help support you in your, you know, ambassador role, little things that I could do to make this like to make them supported,
Yeah.
or and make them feel supported. So I don't want to like go into a tangent, but anyways, now the main focus is to raise money to create scholarships for aspiring fitness professionals who want to be in the fitness industry in Washington, Oregon, to give them like their certifications for free, to pay for their certifications and
Hmm.
training and whatnot. So yeah, that's been since September of 2019, and now we're here. So it's like nonprofit status pending. So, which means I will get that status. In the meantime, I'm still working on paperwork.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine. Starting a nonprofit is probably a lot of work. So kudos to you. And
Thank
I
you.
just love the idea of that too, because I mean, fitness, it doesn't, I think that like if you were to like search a fitness hashtag on Instagram, for example, you'd see a lot of people who are very, very, very thin, um, or like super muscly. And the thing is that fitness comes in all shapes, sizes, colors. You know, you don't have to look one certain way to be fit. Just because you're a size two,
Identities as well.
yeah, just because you're a size two doesn't mean you're like the healthiest person around. I don't know. So I really look forward to seeing what you do with fitness professionals of color, because I'm really interested to just get to learn more about what fitness means to different people, you know, because I think like the dominant idea right now is just that you're supposed to like fit into this cookie cutter box and look a certain way,
Hmm.
which doesn't help any of us because we're all very unique, and different things work for different bodies. And so I'm excited to see what you have to do.
Thank you.
So what are some things that you wish people knew about the Asian American experience? And you can say even like even not even like the Hawaiian American experience, or like somebody coming from Hawaii.
Hmm. Uh, I I guess with my experiences of how people had this like stereotype mindset of what Hawaii is like, it just shows of like the learning that needs to be done in like education, right? In their education. And I can't like tell them like plug in more Hawaiian or like more Asian American culture. Like, yeah, like all of those things, even for the Black Lives Matter, like it's like for like the Black experience to be shared, like I mean stress into education. And the one thing for Asian American, the experience that I want people to know is to forego that model minority myth, because as an Asian American, for some reason, I get like, I struggle with this because people think the model minority Asian is like, have good grades, work hard, no struggle, no issues or whatever. Mom and dad are like doctors and lawyers or something like that. And I'm like, and it's funny because like I met this Asian mom from Canada. She lives she lived in Portland. Yeah, lives in Portland. And I shared my Asian experience. I was like, yeah, like it's so hard. I just feel like as an Asian American, like I've had struggles or whatever, blah blah blah. And she's like, we're part of the privilege too, you know. I'm like, what? And you know, and that like shook me. And it, of course, like my lack of understanding of like realizing like, oh, I didn't realize that there's this myth going around of like there are like the picture perfect Asian or whatever. And for me, I'm like, okay, well, in Hawaii, it was kind of different. Like my mom and dad were working so freaking hard. Like we barely had food on the table. Like we had to fend for ourselves when our parents were working like overnight shift. Like we didn't have them around because they were working so hard to pay for the house, the roof over our heads, you know, and we never got opportunities to like go to clubs after school. We had to just like hang out after school and wait until like 6 p.m. for someone to pick us up. Or if not, if we're brave enough, we can like walk home if we needed to. And every Asian experience is different. And like, I just feel as if like when I'm sharing, if I like, I want to be able to advocate like all of the struggles that Asian Americans have gone through, and with the rise um, of all of the hate crimes that has happened, it's like, you know, I am, I don't want people to like think that like, why are you talking? Like you have everything. I'm like, no, I don't have everything. And you need to like get that out of your butthole right now, because I did not have the picture perfect lifestyle, and I'm just trying to like let that be known, you know? So I'm trying not to like get emotional, but yeah, it grinds my gears that it's that model myth minority that people perceive that Asians just kind of like have it put together, like a cute origami crane. You know, it's like no, like we're freaking crumpled, man. It's like we're doing our best. You know, we are doing our best.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people just, I think it's important to open your mind to what other people have to say, and actually like listen to their stories with an open mind and take it to heart, because people love to project, you know, especially in the age of like Instagram, you just see like the highlights of people's lives. They love to project that they have it all together. Nobody, like people don't often want to sit there and like share their most vulnerable experiences to like the masses, right?
Mhm.
And it takes a lot of bravery to do that, because when you open up yourself to being vulnerable, there's always going to be someone who wants to exploit that. um
Exactly. And
yeah.
like before I forget, it's like it's so hard for me to share like the struggles as an Asian American, because like people will think I'm hypocrite. Like, yeah, but you have everything, you know, like, and that's like the things that the internal like narrative I'll think of. It's like it's so frustrating. So it's hard for me to be able to like be that advocate when it's like people might think that it's like, or may think it's like you're such a hypocrite because like you have everything. So yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that. um do you think that Asian American hate is on the rise, and what's your experience of it been like since you moved to Bend?
Oh man. Well, Bend has been doing an a-okay job. Like they're such sweetheart people, and I love living here. It's it when you put the media of the rise of almost, I don't even know where it's at now, like 2000% increase of Asian hate crimes
Mm.
in the US, towards Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders. Like, I can't help to feel that fear, that instilled fear, that how random these crimes are. Whatever, intentional and random, I'm like, I can't even think like, that perception of like, Bend is so nice and great. Like who knows? Who knows? They might be here or that something might happen. And like even fear for like my kiddos, like they go to the bus and stuff. And it's like, I have to be like on guard because it's like, I can't help it that like, I'll just share it with you. Like, this is what instilled the fear in me because of this, like, the Kung flu virus and how our ex pres had to say that this is such an like Asian type flu or whatever virus. And April, there was this guy, I'll send you this article of like, it was in, if I'm not mistaken, it was like in somewhere in Texas, if I'm not mistaken, at Sam's Club. This guy comes and stabs like two kids, 6 and 2, and one of the parents because he wanted to stop the spread of coronavirus. They're alive right now, but that was already like, I'm done. I'm like, I can't believe it. And that was in April, last April, a year ago. And then now like just like heightened rise, like just of like the elderly being attacked, and especially with like the Filipina mom, or not mom, I guess grandma, elderly lady who like going to church, and then she just gets on surveillance being attacked, and I'm like, when can my heart be like, I guess, like, and in hindsight, with seeing all of these things, being like the natural person of advocacy, I think that's just where I'm at. Like, from growing up in Hawaii, I want to take care of everybody. I want to, like, we had family, despite us being a broken family. I had aunties and uncles and neighbors that were like the safe space. Like, I can go a mile out by myself, knowing that I have like a night auntie down the road, like safe, right? And it's like, I want to be that like auntie for people. Like, I want to take care of everybody as much as I can. And I want to be, even if I don't have like um as a Filipino, like, be like, I don't want to cause conflict, because that's what my mom and dad actually brought up. It's like, don't cause issues. Let's just keep working hard, do well in school, don't do anything, don't cause drama. Okay, or else you're gonna get disciplined, and so I made sure I did everything right by the book. And of course, like, now I'm like, I want to be able to take care of people. However, I don't want to, because of like that fear. Like, I don't want to cause any issues. I don't want to like ruffle anyone's feathers. I want to be, but how I could do it from closed doors, how I could be able to like be that safe space for people, like on the side, like I want to be able to do that. And so that was like part of this pursuit for this nonprofit. That's like how I am reflecting on who I am, that has shaped my identity as an Asian American and living in Hawaii. Like, I want to be able to stand up for the Asian community, and it's like, how can I do that? How can I be able to speak up on my social media? Like, even the question of like, is it even making a difference? Like, do I have to advocate, like, even in Bend when like it's pretty calm waters here? It's like, do I have to start something here? Like, I can't be able to go big, right? It's like always starting from in a smaller cell of like, or a smaller area, and then work my way out. There's so many things that I like, my heart just like wants to take care of because of my upbringing, and but it's yeah, it's been hard and frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable and talking about this. I mean, I think
Oh,
it's important for people to know like how scary it is for other people. It's terrifying that somebody would target you just because of the way that you look, you know? Um, and I really don't think like a lot of white people get it. I don't think that, you know, because they've never experienced hate just purely based on how they look. Generally, I mean, I think that like people who are in larger bodies sometimes experience that, you know, type of discrimination. But for the most part, like the average white American, you know, they may have struggles in their life, but they don't experience discrimination purely based on how they look. And I think it's really important for white Americans to be able to listen to and see that it's terrifying for people. You know, the idea that you could go to a grocery store and be shot just because you look a certain way is terrifying. And so I really appreciate you being so vulnerable about that, and being able to open up about that. So I do have some resources, not a lot. I mean, Angelica and I, before we started filming this, we kind of talked a little bit about the history of, you know, Asians in America.
mhm.
It's something that, you know, we learn as part of Hawaiian history, just because Hawaii does have such a large Asian influence because of the plantations back in the day. A lot of people from Asia came over. Also, like we are, we're kind of a stepping stone in the Pacific between the United States and Japan. I think is the closest one to us. So, a lot of Japanese people in Hawaii, a lot of Chinese people in Hawaii, big Asian influence, a lot of Filipino people in Hawaii.
Mhm.
And you know, growing up in Hawaii, I mean, these families that came over way back in the day to work in plantations kind of did assimilate into the Hawaiian culture. And there's a lot of local people these days with last names like, I don't know, Takahashi and
Mhm.
like a lot of like, or, you know, Chang, a lot of like Chinese last names, a lot of Portuguese last names, and
Totally.
Japanese last names and stuff. So um, something that I was talking about earlier, I read it or I watched it in school, Picture Bride, great movie. The Joy Luck Club is a book I read that I really like, talking a lot about like the Chinese American or the Chinese like some of the history of what went on in China and
Mhm.
why people moved. And then actually, this is a place that I've gone because I'm an acupuncturist. So I went to traditional Chinese medicine school here in Oregon. And there's a place in John Day, Oregon called the Kamwa Chung Heritage Site, which I would recommend anybody from Oregon go visit. I think it's closed right now. It's technically a national park, like an Oregon park. But it belonged to two Chinese men, I like from the early 1900s. They were acupuncturists in John Day, and that was a time when Chinese people were severely discriminated against. A lot of them came over to America to like work on the railroads and that sort of thing, but they were really discriminated against. They were like forced to live all together. You, they weren't supposed to like, I don't know, like they were supposed to kind of stay in their little Chinatown zones and just work for America, but like never really assimilate. And there's just all kinds of like hatred towards them. I mean, I would recommend that anybody look that up. But these two men living in John Day were healers, and they healed a lot of people. And there's still like letters that you can read from like their white patients talking about like how much of a difference they made in their lives. And the whole area had like, after these men died or something, it just got boarded up. And so it's really
Mhm.
like stepping into a little piece of history. They have like how kind of it shows how they used to live all together with bunk beds, and like they have this really cool old walk. um,
Oh.
yeah, so would recommend people going and looking into that and just
Wait,
trying.
where is it? Where's it located?
John Day, Oregon,
Oh,
which is like
okay.
out by the Painted Hills.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Kind of close to us
yeah,
ish.
I went out there with some of the people from my class when I first moved to Oregon to go to acupuncture school. We went and we camped out there and got a tour of the heritage site because they were acupuncturists, and so it's kind of cool seeing some of their old like medicinary and some of the old crazy needles they used to use that we don't use today. But anyway, yeah. Is there anything? Do you have any resources, Ange, or just to encourage people to do some of
Well,
their own research?
well, I mean, yes, for sure. Like, um, I think also like if you have a chance, like have conversations, more conversations, and like allow Asian Americans, like your friends, community or whatever, like share their story, like it's kind of it's fascinating, and I appreciate like even other like Asians, like let's say like my Asian friend from the Bay Area, she has a different story, her own share of struggles, and it's like, huh, like I'm glad that you were able to share that with me too, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Mhm.
I think another thing, I would hear this a lot growing up in Hawaii is like, oh, all Asians look the same. Like, how can you even tell, like, if they're Chinese or Japanese or whatever,
Oh
they all look the same,
gosh.
or Korean. And that is such a myth that I have heard repeated numerous times. And, there's a lot of Asia's a huge place. There's a lot of different countries, a lot of different types of people come out of, of Asia, and they all have their own like rich national identities and cultural practices, and they don't all look the same. And yeah, I would just encourage people to get to know some of people's stories. I think that's great recommendation.
Mhm.
Talk to different people that hear their stories. Where did their parents come from? If they're open to talking about it, like don't badger them if they don't want to talk about it. If they're like, dude, I'm American, leave me alone, then leave them alone.
I know, exactly. I know it's different because it's like the history or like my story as a Filipina is completely different from somebody who's Korean. Korean definitely different for sure.
All right. Well, we are going to sign off. But again, thanks so much. And
Thank
Angela,
you.
Angelica, sorry, where can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram at underscore underscore Angelica Lee underscore underscore. And if you want to follow my nonprofit, Fitness Professionals of Color PNW.org, and the Instagram as well. So yeah.
Angelica makes the best reels. So definitely go watch them because
Try.
they're
Try.
so fun. And are you still doing your online classes?
Yeah, surprisingly, it has been blowing up because of TikTok, which is wild. So I get like new writers every day. Every time I'm teaching, it's like, oh, where are you from? Like, oh, I'm from like Chicago. I found you on TikTok. Like, wow. So I've been really fortunate because people are still wanting to look for like these like really small like virtual classes other than Peloton. So I'm like, yeah, I'm so fortunate to do that. And it's like there's no, I'm like, I wanted to stop. I'm like, all right, it's time, it's over. But it's like, oh, actually, like there's like 20 people that signed up. Like, oh, okay.
That's
So
awesome.
still going, still
Right.
going. Yeah.
And yeah, anyone who has a bike at home, go check her out because Angelica's classes are so fun. She's the funnest.
Yes. Please. Yeah, come get the aloha spirit.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, where did your energy come from? It's like, oh, it's because I'm from Hawaii. That's why.
Yep, you're channeling it, girl.
Yeah, exactly. So good.
All right, take care.
Bye, Danielle. Thank you.